countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne. In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all. 1 ring to find them. 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
I got goosebumps. Oh, man. What an opening. What an opening. The Last Comic Shop podcast this week. Man, I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson, and that was the magnificent J.A. Scott taking a page from The Lord of the Rings, arguably the most famous fantasy franchise out there, I think. I mean,
yeah, still, it's the one. I'm so excited to read Lord of the Rings this week.
We are not reading Lord of the Rings this week,
what?
though. We aren't. No, Chad Smith, my wonderful other co-host. We are reading something else, though, that has a long, long history of fantasy in comics. It's arguably one of the longest running fantasy comic books out there. It is ElfQuest. That's right. J.A. picked this for this week. And what was the main reason that you wanted to read ElfQuest, honestly?
The YouTube algorithm threw up somebody who was talking about sort of the history of ElfQuest and the fact that Wendy and Richard Pini had been doing this essentially independently for 20, 30 years. And, you know, they partnered with Marvel for a while. They were at Dark Horse for a while. They were at DC for a while. They had their own thing for a while. They finally won an Eisner, sort of, I think it was the Eisner Hall of Fame Eisner, a couple of years ago, and they have almost all of the original stuff up until their most recent Dark Horse signings and new material coming out, all online for free at ElfQuest.com, along with some really crazy facts about ElfQuest we will get into. But I thought, I mean, it's been running for 40-some years now, going on 50 years. Very similar, you could say, to TMNT, just never got as big as the Turtles did, but one of those independent comics from the 80s that helped to define an era.
No, absolutely.
Is it still going? I thought they ended it. It was, as of 2018, ElfQuest is considered to have ended after 40 years.
But you're right. Regardless of whether it's still going on or it's ended, ElfQuest has had a major footprint on comics, and again, I'm excited to read it finally because it is one of those series that was always on my back burner. I won't lie. I think the first time I ever saw anything about ElfQuest was way back in the late 90s. I think I was reading an article that was in Wizard at one point. They were talking about ElfQuest and how long it was going on. At that time, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I was interested. I was intrigued because I think I've said before that good fantasy-related comic books, other than maybe Conan the Barbarian and Red Sonja and stuff, few and far between. Like, for example, I don't really think there ever was a really great Dungeons and Dragons comic book, just simply because I think that's a different kind of medium.
The whole point of it is to choose your own adventure. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Here, everything it's a different thing. Everything's set down for you. You don't really have a lot of options.
Yeah, so I was curious about ElfQuest, and so I'm glad that we're reading it. For those folks that are reading along at home, we were reading selections from the first volume of the complete ElfQuest, which I think contains the first 20-some issues of ElfQuest.
Yeah, so we were reading the original Quest, which is the first 20 issues ever published. You can get it in a trade for very, very cheap. Or, as I said, you can read it online at ElfQuest.com for free. And the online version is the color version. We'll get into that in a bit as well.
Oh, yeah, no, because I kind of like the black and white, to be very honest. Like it had that nice 70s, 80s, creepy, eerie magazine kind of look to it. Kind of fit. Savage sort of Conan's kind of stuff. But in any case, one other thing that we're going to be doing on today's show is recapping the final weekly polls. That's right. Last week we did 5, and this week we're going to do another 5, the final 5 that we have in the hopper. Try to get us up to speed on everything. Now, I think JA since stopped doing these for a little while, but the poll master, I feel like he needs to close out a particular season of polls. So, JA, what was the first poll that we're going to be talking about today?
Who was the best film Joker?
Ooh.
Is it Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, Jared Leto, or Joaquin Phoenix?
Okay. Well, I know mine. But let's start off with Chad. What did you pick for this one?
I feel like this is a no-brainer. It's got to be the Heath Ledger one. Just that pencil scene where he makes the pencil disappear. I have nightmares about that to this day, just off and on. It's such an original take, so creepy. Ugh.
Yeah, all right, JA, did you also go with Heath Ledger?
I also went with Heath Ledger, though, Jack Nicholson has a special place in my heart because the 89 Batman movie has a special place in my heart, but Heath Ledger was, just if you can out Nicholson, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I still voted for Jack Nicholson, as folks may go back to our review of Batman 89 and listen. I still believe my favorite Joker is the gangster type Joker. I don't really like the anarchist type Joker like Heath Ledger portrayed, but I will say that leading up to that movie, everybody was like, no, nobody's going to do it better than Jack. Nobody's going to do it. And then Heath Ledger came on the scene and arguably did it better than Jack. So even though I prefer my Jack Nicholson, I got to give props to Heath Ledger. Anybody's better than Jared Leto, I'll say that much.
Well, the voters agreed with you, Andrew, because nobody voted for Jared Leto.
Do you think it's just because that movie's just bad? Like the Suicide Squad movie was just not very good?
I never made it all the way through, so I couldn't tell you one way or the other.
So Heath Ledger did win with 66% of the vote. Jack Nicholson second. Joaquin Phoenix a distant third.
Oh, well, we'll have to see whether or not that changes after the new Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie drops in a couple months. So, in any case, what was poll number 2, J.A.?
Poll number 2 was, what indie comic would you want to go Hollywood? This is in the week that we read Spawn. So we watched Spawn, the movie, unfortunately, and read Spawn, the book, also. So, the options were Bone, The Max, Sex Criminals, or Shadow Man.
Well, I'll start off with my pick, and it's because I honestly was one of the folks that was really, really disappointed when Netflix pulled the plug on this project, I believe at a pretty late stage at that point, which was Bone. They were planning on making an animated series that was going to debut on Netflix. I think it was during COVID or something like that. Of all the picks that were there, that transcends comic books in my opinion. It is magnificent storytelling and magnificent cartooning from Jeff Smith. So I feel like that should get a lot more publicity than even does now. Chad, do you agree?
Bone is great, but for me, man, that Max animated series that was on MTV back in the day, that was the bomb. I would love to see that revisited with, throw a Guillermo del Toro style director in there that can play around with it and really make it dark and twisted and bring out Sam Keith's vision. So that's where my vote went.
All right. J.A., your pick?
Oh, my vote was Shadow Man. I would have loved the dark and broody, sort of like a Crow, but set in New Orleans with a jazz player. You get some nice jazz saxophone scenes and all the sort of occult stuff that goes up around Shadow Man, him against Mr. Dark.
I think Aerosmith is still touring through this summer.
And there you go. There you go.
That is my favorite issue. But I will say that I agree, J.A., that I think that Valiant backed the wrong horse when they made Bloodshot, the Bloodshot movie first. I honestly think they would have done their franchises a service by picking Shadow Man as one, because I think, especially if you did it with some goth horror aspects or things like that, I think it would have had some crossover appeal with other groups that weren't interested in superheroes.
Yeah, totally. Like, you can mix in sort of a little bit of Anne Rice, and lots more stuff you could do with that instead of just having Vin Diesel run around with blood that puts himself back together again.
But who won? Who won ultimately?
A Bone won with 40% of the vote.
I do not understand why Hollywood doesn't jump all over that. That is made for an animated picture or series or something. That is cash in hand.
Maybe they just haven't caught it yet. They're just chasing that bone.
All right. What's number 3, J.A.?
The best new Ultimate Universe book. What are you liking the most? Is it the Spider-Man series, the Ultimate Black Panther series, the Ultimate X-Men series? I know that one got my vote. Or this was early on, so I think they only had 2 issues out at the time. But the new Ultimates, which is sort of the Avengers of the Ultimate Universe.
All right, Chad, what was your pick?
I'm going to go with the Ultimate Spider-Man book. I'm still, dreaming of the side franchise where you just have Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson buddying around town, being beat reporters. That's my dream.
Yeah, no, that was my pick too. As a Spider-Man fan, that series has been a dream come true. They're hitting every single note, picture perfect. You got Peter and Harry, you got MJ and Gwen hanging out, you got Ben and J. Jonah Jameson. Lots of great relationships. I don't know, maybe it's a bunch of fan wanky Easter eggs, but I love it. And I know, J.A., you voted for X-Men.
I did, yes.
Did that come?
It came in second, but Ultimate Spider-Man won with nearly 80% of the vote. So a lot of people are really liking that Ultimate Spider-Man book.
And don't sleep on the Ultimates book.
Yeah, I have loved it. I will say, as a follow-up from our show where we did Ultimate Invasion into Ultimate Universe, I have been reading the Ultimates, and that is a really, really great book. Every single month, I'm really enjoying it. How they're putting the team back together. Loved the first issue where they went and got Janet and Hank Pym. And there's just little subtle nods. How, like, the Reed Richards in that universe refuses to be called Reed. He's now being called Doom. Like, he wants to be called Doom now. It's not just like that the maker called him Doom. He answers only to Doom. It's interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. J.A., what was poll number 4?
What is the most iconic costume in comic books? Is it Superman with his blue tights and red cape? Is it Spider-Man? Is it Batman? Or is it Captain America and the Shield of Justice?
I mean, Superman and Captain America, I think, have iconic looks, and I don't think any of their secondary costumes really caught on, but boy, Spider-Man and Batman have some really great alternative costumes. And guys, what is the iconic Batman costume? Chad?
For me, it's the 80s, yellow oval, light blue, and gray. That's my Batman.
Yeah, your grays and blues. J.A.?
Yep.
Yeah, me too. With the really tall ears in the cowl and the cloak that comes down right above the breastbone.
Which occasionally takes off the shirt and still has the cloak.
Yeah, still wearing the cowl, but nothing else.
The Neil Adams, Jim Aparo. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, but I do not think that is the costume that folks of younger generations think of. They think of the all black costumes when it comes to Batman.
I'll be honest. I thought Superman was going to take this running away because his costume. Yes, he's had a couple of sort of minor modifications to it, and that black costume, whatever. But mostly, it's regardless of the artist, drawn very similarly. He did not win. He got 32% of the vote. Spider-Man took it with 42%.
Yeah, I will go down swinging that Steve Ditko is the best costume designer in all of comics.
It's hard not to agree with that, Chad. Not just Spider-Man on that original Amazing Spider-Man, but just think of his rogues gallery. Think of all of those iconic costumes, some of which have no business being awesome. Like, really, if you think about it, Electro.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going to. Who comes up with the idea? Let's put 3 lightning bolt prongs on this dude's head.
You have to turn your head sideways to get through door frames. But it's awesome. And they've tried to change Electro's look. They've tried to take that stupid thing off of him. They gave him like the blue skin and whatever, and like bald head or garbage. Hot garbage.
Yep, they always change it back. You always go back to Ditko. Think of the Question. How cool of a design is the Question?
Yeah, you're right. All right, J.A., we've got one last poll, and this one's the big one. So a couple weeks back, if you may or may not remember, we did the last soda shop. We took 16 of the most popular soda brands out there. We put them head-to-head, and Dr. Pepper wasn't even in the top 4.
I'm under protest. Since we had recorded that episode, Dr. Pepper had overtaken Coca-Cola as the number 1 carbonated beverage.
But it didn't in our final 4 bracket. So the final 4 in our last soda shop was, J.A.?
Cherry flavored soda, Coke, Sprite, or soda water, sparkling water. Yeah, carbonated water.
You know what? Chad can grouse all he wants.
Champagne of Poland Spring.
About Dr. Pepper not making it into the final 4, but I will still say, to this day, the fact that soda water got into the final 4, please, ridiculous, outrageous. Any case, who was the eventual winner, J.A.?
Well, thankfully, better heads prevailed because for a while, cherry flavored soda was actually leading.
Damn straight.
And then Coke overtook it to win with 43% of the vote.
But it was really close. It was neck and neck.
That could have swung either way just based on a couple pumps of some cherry-flavored syrup into a... The thing is that all you need, I mean, essentially a cherry-flavored soda is cherry-flavored syrup mixed with sparkling water. Sparkling water, if you take sparkling water's votes and add them to the cherry-flavored... And then you get something that overtakes
No! I'm curious about what we're going to do next year. We did chicken, we did burgers, we did soda condiments. Can we do condiments next year? Is mustard going to top mayo?
Well, I was thinking we do pie.
Ooh.
The apple pie, the strawberry rhubarb pie. That's probably just a strawberry. The pecan. Is it pecan or pecan pie?
Pecan. Yeah. Fries.
Yeah. Curly fries versus the crinkle cut. What's the best fry? Who makes the best fry?
Where do you consider the McDonald's fry? Do you consider it fresh when it's absolutely the best thing ever? Or like 30 seconds later when it's just hot garbage?
Yeah, exactly. Or how about the worst is when you get it and it's obviously the last bit before they put in the new. and you're getting the dregs, so they were in the oil slightly too long, so it's like the burnt McDonald's fry.
And let's be honest, you're eating McDonald's in the first place, so you know things aren't going well. Yeah. And then you get those fries on top of it. It's like, oh.
All right. Well, maybe fries will be our pick next year. Make sure that you're tuning in next 4th of July for whatever last blankety blank shop is going to be there. But make sure that you're checking out our social media every single week, just in case J.A. decides, I feel like putting out a poll this week. Maybe he will. Who knows? But in any case, one thing that we do know is that we will be right back after these commercial breaks with our review of ElfQuest. Stay tuned.
Maybe you should try some Poland Springs sparkling water.
When you're done listening to this podcast, check out mine. My name is Dave, and I'm the host of Beer in Front. My podcast is just enjoying the beer that's in front of you. Sometimes we forget about a classic beer while we focus on the new trendy thing. What I try to do each week is to enjoy an old school classic or have a beer that has potential to be a classic. I'll also talk about events of the day, I'll add my spin to things, and each week there are people that really annoy me, and I'll call them out as the jag-off of the week. That's Beer in Front, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, and today we are tackling that fantasy series that ran all of 40 years, and I think there may or may not still be spin-offs, but I don't know if the mainline creators are still doing it. But it is ElfQuest, and we read the first 5 issues of the initial quest. I know Andy and I read black and white versions, and J.A. read the colorized versions online. So let's go to J.A. Scott. Who are the prime creators involved in ElfQuest?
Okay, so ElfQuest, in all of its 40-year history, was really a husband and wife team, Wendy and Richard Pini. Wendy did the art, and they both handled the writing duties and scripting duties for everything that they've put out. And since, and sort of ran the company, it really became its own thing. As I said, a lot of this stuff you can all find online for free at elfquest.com. That's where I read my original issues. They have put out some of the books. Very easy to find, very approachable if you're looking to get into ElfQuest. And as I said, the team themselves, they were inducted into the Eisner Hall of Fame.
So how did they meet? You have an interesting story, though, about how they met and stuff.
Yes. So Richard Pini saw a letter that Wendy wrote, Silver Surfer number 5, with Stan Lee and John Buscema, and he and this is back when they put your return address on the letter, or he did some stalking and he sent her a letter.
You have the letter, right? You have the letter, right?
I do. Let me read a little bit from it. Dear Stan and John, I want to say the Silver Surfer mags so far have been quite lovely and far surpassed the quality of the best efforts of your competitors.
Make mine marvel. Make mine marvel, Wendy.
The artwork, coloring, and plots are thoroughly enthralling, but Stan, my dear, sweet fellow, what bitter streak of melancholia lurks within the folds of thine ever-hallowed noodle?
That is awesome. But she's not just known for that letter, right, Chad? Wendy also made quite a buzz back in the day, right, as a cosplayer.
That's true. She would attend comic conventions dressed as Red Sonja, and she was famous for her cosplay as well as her art and her stories and her elf questing. So it's worth a Google online. You can see her with Frank Thorne, one of the best-known Red Sonja artists. I think there's a Roy Thomas picture out there on the interwebs. But yeah, Wendy Pini, famous cosplayer. So we're not here to talk about the cosplay aspects. We're here to talk about ElfQuest. So Andy, what happens in the first 5 issues of ElfQuest?
So here comes your 10-cent synopsis of ElfQuest, the first 5 issues. It is Sexy Smurfs. No, there's a lot more that goes on with it. Somewhere where there were humans and then elves appear. They came down from the skies or something. And humans were like, we don't like you because you have pointy ears and you're different or whatever. And so the humans drove them away. And then many, many years pass. And some of the elves went and lived in the woods, started riding wolves. That's where kind of the story begins. There's this tribe of wolf-riding elves that are led by this elf named Cutter, or Tam, if you know his soul name. Not his soul patch, his soul name. But he kills a human. And as a result of that, he has to take his tribe and they have to run away. And eventually they go into a cave where they're betrayed by some trolls. They're kind of like the ElfQuest version of dwarves, I feel. And they're let out into the middle of the desert. And they travel across the desert and they almost die. But they manage to find another elven city. And this one's a little bit more civilized than, their barbarian cousins. And there, Cutter meets Lita, who is this healer. And together over the next couple of issues, it's like a Sam and Diane thing where it's like, are they going to? Are they not going to? But they recognize each other. There's a whole thing about recognition. And you have to you recognize me, so that means you must love me. And she's like, no, I don't love you. I love this other guy. And this guy has to fight on this bridge. And long story short, at the end, they have sex. They have to. Because
they don't.
They have kids,
they don't.
Right?
They don't have sex.
What do you mean they don't have sex?
According to the ElfQuest facts page, ElfQuest elves do not marry, become husband and wives. They do not have sex or any other more colorful terms, nor do they experience love at first sight, as those are all human-based emotions. Our elves do, however, become life mates and love mates, and they do join. And some of them even recognize each other. So there you go.
Wow.
Apparently no kissing. No kissing in ElfQuest.
Oh.
Okay, but hold on.
Just a bunch of sexy elves just keeping it to themselves.
But hold on, guys. You read these first 5 issues. At the end of issue 5, there's like this scene where Cutter's hanging out in front of Lita's place, and then they walk up into the woods. And the next thing you know, it's like...
Oh, yeah. It's they're having a cigarette.
They're doing more than having a cigarette. That's what you have after what they were doing up in the woods. And later on, they have 2 children. Like, that makes no sense.
The fact says...
You don't know the rules.
Apparently not. You're not an OQ ElfQuest guy.
Yeah. And I was going to say, too, speaking of letters... I was just flipping through the letter column for issue 5, and guess who appears from Lexington, Mass? Letter writer Kurt Busiek.
Ooh, yeah. So keeping that going on with like folks in the letter columns that eventually we'd hear of in other aspects of comics. But that's, yeah, I will say this. I may have been glib about ElfQuest in my 10-cent synopsis, but that's because I'm trying to entertain. Honestly, this is an entertaining book. My initial thoughts of ElfQuest are as follows. I thought the art was spectacular. I mean, Wendy is just an absolute gorgeous, gorgeous artist. Everything has that same kind of feel to it that you would get from like John Buscema. That high fantasy, she really just nails it. I will say, though, like a lot of Bronze Age comics, it was very verbose at times. Lots of words, lots of unnecessary words. And these issues are like triple size because I think this only came out quarterly.
No, only 3 times a year. So I think that's also, if you go in thinking you're just getting a normal comic book and then you feel like, wow, this issue is going on for a while, it's because they only put it out 3 times a year. So this original quest took 7 or 8 years to fully publish, and they started it with the end in mind. That's something that we didn't mention in sort of the introductory section, which I found very fascinating, is that they had a fully formed story arc and then just took 20 issues to tell it.
I read, I think, well into issues 15, 16, 17, but I won't lie. There were some issues I just kind of glossed over, just looking at the art and seeing if there was anything interesting. Lots of characters, too. Like, unnecessarily a lot of characters. Again, I think back to my Smurfs comment. Like, they had, like, Handy Smurf and Baker Smurf, and this is like this 6 other people. I'm like, who are these people?
Yeah, I would have liked, one of those little face pages with a face and a name and a little write-up on each person so you can flip back and see who's who.
The cynic in me is like, yeah, there's 3 characters that matter, and the rest are all Dew Shine and Rainwater and Fluggle Blig and Picky Nose and Purple Toes and Jimmy Joes. That don't really matter. It's just sexy elves just bopping around, recognizing each other, hunting with wolves. But no, the less cynical version of me was like, no, this fits. This is what it is. It is more verbose, but I feel like it fits my perception of the fantasy genre. you know, you have these elves going on these quests and meet up with these trolls. And while this may or may not be my thing, I think for what it is, you know, if you're a big time fantasy reader, I think you're going to get what you're looking for here.
Yeah. I was curious which you thought was the three elves you needed to know other than Cutter and Lita. Who's the third one? His buddy? His drinking
Moonshine. Or what is his name? Not Moonshine. Shoot.
Yeah, he's not one of them. Well, for a while in the story we read, it's the Ray.
Oh,
the third guy.
The guy that was named after the batteries.
And
where they're like, we tried not to be so glib. There are probably people who like, you know, ElfQuest is their life.
And that's true. And I'm hoping that they're listening to this show, and then they.
Oh no, like Moonshadow. No, it's like Moon something, isn't it?
I know
it's not Moonshine, obviously.
The guy that's wearing
Lodestone.
Skywise.
That's it. Yes, Skywise.
He's smooching this panel.
Yeah,
he's like,
that's
oh,
right.
You can see it better if you lean back.
Well, apparently their
mouth.
mouths touch, but that's not kissing, because kissing is a human notion.
Oh, good.
Their foreheads light up, so they're just lighting up foreheads.
They do that telekinesis thing.
I thought that was actually really neat. I mean, there were certain aspects of this that, again, as somebody that's played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, that has read other fantasy stuff, I mean, it all made sense. Like, elves are supposed to be more magical. I like how they translated that magicalness into, like, other comic book tropes that you could understand, like telepathy. Like, that's fairly easy now for folks that read a lot of comic books to understand. So, like, I got that. I didn't understand recognition. That was just weird. That was because it comes up again because they eventually meet these elves that are half like bat people that live up in like the sky kingdoms or whatever, and like there's more recognition going on there with some tortured soul and some like nubile blonde.
Well, in simplest terms, recognition is a primal, nearly irresistible mating urge between two elves. On a deep and subconscious level, even if they don't or can't consciously send, all elves are telepathic. So every elf unconsciously knows every other elf's innermost makeup. When a female and a male get within range of each other, and the mix of qualities is right for a cub that will benefit the tribe, an instinctual command to mate bursts powerfully into each elf's awareness.
So they have sex. How else are they going to mate?
They mate. It's an elven process. We just don't know. We didn't read that far.
Now I'm thinking that they go up in the hills, they get naked, and then one of them, like, I don't know, it's like a sponge, and they just cut off. Because she gives birth. She gives birth in the 6th issue. Literally.
Andy, relax. This is not Game of Thrones. You're going to give people the wrong idea.
Yes.
I mean, just because there's a lot of sexy elves like this.
They're wholesome, sexy elves.
Yeah.
Please. That's like saying that, like, the Cyclops and Jean Grey never had sex. Forget it. Peter Parker and Mary Jane never had sex. They just went in there.
Well, both of those couples got married, sir.
These people got married? You're crazy.
Yeah, but they didn't invite the battery guy in. They're like, hey, Rayback, what do you think about it? And he's like, no. And then he goes off into the woods.
All right. Well, Jay, it was your pick after all. Before we get to commercial break, how much did you read? Like, did you just read the first 5, or did you read
I read the first 5, and I wanted to read more, and I probably will come back and read more. And as I said, I'm glad that we did it. I thought it was an important comic book that had been overlooked by our podcast, and I think it's maybe overlooked by a lot. But growing up, I didn't know a lot of people who read ElfQuest. I saw a lot of ElfQuest related stuff because in the late 80s, this is a property that they licensed to a lot of different companies, and you see it. Like, there was a Marvel run of ElfQuest, there was a DC run of ElfQuest, there was a Dark Horse run of ElfQuest, there was an ElfQuest game. Not all of that was really well done, and Richard and Wendy Pini have opinions on, the stuff that they kind of thought got away from them a bit. They've done a really good job of keeping their property whole, if you will, and not allowing these companies to subvert sort of her vision, which is and that's why it was originally published independently, because she didn't want to change her vision or to make it maybe less sexy elves or more Game of Thrones and less sexy Smurfs. So
yeah, well,
I'm glad
even the first issue they published, they ended up redoing it basically because the company that put it out, it wasn't up to their quality standards. And so that's what got them into self-publishing was, they didn't like the paper stock. They didn't like the colors on the cover. And so it is something that's been nurtured and protected and to made sure that it was a quality product.
Well, one thing that we hope is a quality product is The Last Comic Shop for all of our listeners. And one thing that is always on The Last Comic Shop is ratings. And that is coming up right after these commercial breaks. So stay tuned.
LastComicShopPodcast.com is the destination for all things shop. Plan your week with upcoming show schedules, the latest books, recommendations, and chatter from the crew. Subscribe to the show on all major podcasting platforms from one convenient location. Show your support and browse the merch store. T-shirts, tanks, hoodies for the fam, coffee mugs, magnets, totes, and more. Check out exclusive content through the show's YouTube channel and follow the pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and others. All this and so much more at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
Hi folks, this is Sean from the Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast. If you enjoy genuine conversation from two guys who love the subjects that they're talking about, you need to check us out. Honest to goodness conversation about the things that we love. So give us a listen. We're easy to find. Just search Pittsburgh Nerd on some of your favorite podcast catching apps, or you can also check out our vlog on YouTube. Just search Pittsburgh Nerd. We're really, really easy to find.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for ratings, where you don't have to quest for our 1 out of 4 scale. J.A. Scott gives it to you very easily. You don't have to walk up to a lake and throw something in there and wait for some sexy broad to pull out a sword and give it back to you. Yeah, it just happens. 1 out of 4 scale for ElfQuest. Coming up, J.A., what is it?
1 out of 4 sends.
Ooh, I like that. It's like my Professor Xavier telepathy sound effect. I use it all the time, but it fits here. Sure. We're going to go ahead and start off with Chad, because he didn't feel like we talked a lot about the plot of ElfQuest during the previous segment. So, Chad, I thought that maybe if you want to, here's your chance.
Now you're gonna put me on the spot to talk about the plot. I enjoyed the character interactions here in this series. I did like the love triangle between Rayek and Cutter and Alita. How Rayek was the old friend, and then Cutter's Wolf Rider. That they stumble into Rayek's village because they've been forced out of their home by humans, and then deceived by the trolls and Picky Nose and all that other fun stuff. But I really did enjoy the love triangle aspects there. And this is one of those series that I always feel like I end up saying, this really isn't my thing. And this one, it's really not my thing. But every issue, I'd be like, okay. I was excited to pick up the next one. And it really felt to me kind of like when we were doing One Piece. It was very similar, where it's like everything just kind of flowed into the next thing. And I've seen this referred to as the first American manga. And I can see it. I can just see that action adventure. It had the melodrama of your old school X-Men, the different characters and their backgrounds and personal histories. And then Cutter's dad was, friendly with the trolls and out there drinking Dreamberry wine. And, every now and again, the silly names would get to be a little bit, there's Dream Sleeper, and I'm not making that up.
Ooh, Dreamweaver.
There's Skywise and Voltron. No, as silly as and I sound super dismissive, and I know that's driving Jay crazy. I don't mean to be, just because this was fun. It was entertaining, And like I said, if this is your thing, if you're into fantasy and elves and dwarves and things of that nature, I think this is something you could very easily latch on to. And for me personally, is this something that I would continue to read? Probably not. But like, if one of my kiddos got into it, and was like, hey, Dad, let's read this, I would gladly read on and be entertained the entire time. We also didn't address, I don't think, too much the black and white versus the colorized nature of it. So you get two different experiences. I spent most of the time in the black and white collection, and I think that really does bring out some of Wendy Pini's just her artistry. And I think she's a wonderful comic artist. The fact that, that this is all basically two people getting this done, and it sounded like Wendy was the one doing the heavy lifting on the series in terms of art and plot, and it's super impressive that this is something that someone could do consistently, over the course of 40 years. Anyway, I liked it. I didn't love it, but like I said, I would be happy to stay with the melodrama if the situation required. And so as far as ratings go, I'm going to give it 3 cents.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to agree with that. 3 cents seems about right for this series. It's been a series I've wanted to read for 20-some years. And I'm glad that J.A. said, yeah, let's finally do it on the last comic shop, because it gave me an excuse to check it out. And I'm glad that I did. I mean, I'm probably, of all the folks here, it sounded the most glib, or sounded like I was making fun of this series the most. Honestly, I wasn't making fun of the series. I was actually making fun of the ElfQuest guide that J.A. found, because that was like the worst. That was the worst. I'm just like, no. Like,
Is it the worst? Is it the worst, or is it the best?
The worst.
Let's be honest. It's so good.
But I genuinely thought the actual comic book was really, really well done. And I think that Wendy is a tremendous comic book talent. I honestly think that maybe her husband, Richard, may have contributed to some of the stuff I didn't like in the series. If it's truly the fact that Wendy was not only the artist, but one of the main plotters, and maybe it was Richard coming in and doing some of the dialogue, I actually thought that it was the dialogue that let this series down sometimes, or made it drag, or was a little bit of a slog. That's why I can't give it really a 4, because again, there were parts of it when I genuinely was just looking at the art. I would skim some of the words, especially like issues 6 through 10. As I continued to read, I was just like, yeah, is this a story I care about? And I would just move on. And eventually I reconnected with it once they met all the bird elves folks. I thought that was kind of an interesting storyline. But yeah, there were too many characters too. And maybe that was one of the benefits of seeing it in color. I didn't read a lick of it in color. But maybe the colors would have made me distinguish certain elves from other elves, instead of just like Sliding Door and Board Game or whatever their names were. Yeah, but it's still 3. I still recommend that anybody that's reading comic books, especially people that love Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy, go out and read it.
With the colorized versions, those are the ones that you can find free online at elfquest.com, as Jay had mentioned. For me, it was a little bit more muddled, but then there would also be times where I would go back after reading the black and white version and be like, yeah, I want to see this page in color. And there are times when it adds and times when it just wasn't as consistent for me. But what I did love in the free versions is they give you all the letter columns. They give you the original covers. They give you, all the little extras that, it's like watching the shows from the 90s with the commercial still intact. Like, I just love those parts of the book that you didn't get in the big collections, but you do get for free online. So
yeah, the free online version is actually taken from an out-of-print DC Comics archive edition of the ElfQuest original quest. The color is all done by Wendy. She considers these to be the closest to her original vision of being able to, quote, paint with light. And that's what the colors there is really, I mean, they're really beautiful the way they mix. They almost look a bit, more modern. Definitely not, this is not Bronze Age coloring. So the techniques she was using there are incredible. And there are some pages where color maybe doesn't add or it even takes away from sort of that underground aesthetic that you had going. But some of those vistas in the desert with all the oranges and yellows she uses, and to Andrew's point, the ability to differentiate between characters. So in the black and white version, you would never have known that the tree elves and the desert elves are slightly different colored. Like the desert elves are have a darker skin tone than the tree elves. It's not unlike the tree Na'vi and the water Na'vi in Avatar. Maybe next Avatar movie we're going to get a desert Na'vi, and they'll have a different color, because the tree Na'vi were darker blue than the water Na'vi were lighter blue. So the elves are kind of like that. Right? So maybe these are like proto Na'vi because they do go to space later on.
Space?
Yes.
Space Na'vi?
Space elves.
Space elves? Oh,
That's
you lost
just like
me
combining
now.
everything. I loved it. I'm so glad we read it. I'm glad that I read the color version first and then the black and white. I thought the black and white reads quicker, maybe. When you're reading the black and white, you can focus a bit more on the story because you're not overwhelmed by the art so much, where when I was reading the color version, I would find myself staring at panels or pages just for the painterly construction of it all and forget to read some of the words sometimes. Though, as you said, you can kind of flip through the story. It is very verbose. So if you don't read every single word, you're not going to miss major plot points or major plot devices. I'm also really happy. I mean, this is somebody's life's work, and they've made their money off of it, and now they're letting it out there for everyone to read, so everyone can join in the journey, and you can do it legitimately online. You can find it, you can read it, or if you want to own a physical copy, you can, as I said, the original quest, the first 20 issues, you can get on Amazon for like $10. Trying to get the word out there for anyone who's interested, and then you can experience it on the website ElfQuest.com. There's ElfQuest the audio movie, ElfQuest the show podcast, ElfQuest on YouTube. There's even a blog called A Wolf Rider's Reflections. There's an ElfQuest coloring book you can get. So there's a lot of stuff.
But what's your rating?
Oh, so the story, the art. I'm also giving it slightly bump for the impact it had and the importance of it within the comic book industry. I'm going to give it 3.5. 3.5 cents.
Very good. Very good. Well, one thing that may or may not have as much impact as ElfQuest are our recommendations. Maybe on your life, these are books that you'll pick up and go, wow, I'm so glad that the last comic shop told me about this awesome book in addition to ElfQuest. So when I was at my local comic book shop picking up some stuff, I got both of them. That's awesome. We're going to go ahead and start off with Chad Smith. And Chad, what do you got for us this week?
So you had already brought up this property earlier in the show, but I think Bone, The Adventures of Phony Bone, Smiley Bone, all the bones as they go through. It's the best of the fantasy genre crossed with Disney-esque, DuckTale-y. It's all over the place, and it's just tons of fun, and I'm not going to do it justice. So just is another comic series that has a similar lore about it to ElfQuest. I think it's bringing different people to the yard. And so if you are into ElfQuest, I would encourage you to check out the Eisner Award, Harvey Award winning, just one of the best comics around. One of the best times you can read it with your kiddos. It is Bone.
Yeah. As I said earlier in the show, it's amazing how they haven't animated that. That is cash in people's hands. They got to do it. I was so disappointed when Netflix decided to pass on it. Regardless, one thing you shouldn't pass on if you are a fan of Dungeons and Dragons is Dragonlance. It's probably one of my favorite sub-properties of the Dungeons and Dragons line. And so when I was reading ElfQuest, I immediately started thinking of some of these, like The Legend of Huma, or this week's recommendation, Dragons of the Autumn Twilight, done by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. This was the most important and, cornerstone books of the entire Dragonlance series. The story of the world of Krynn after the Cataclysm, when the Queen of Dragons finally returns, and Tanis half-elfin and all his band of companions has to help Goldmoon bring back the ways of Paladin to the world of Krynn. And an amazing series of adventures that lasted 3 books, including Dragons of Winter Night and Dragons of Spring Dawning. And if you're a comic book fan, you can find all of these books in comic book form. Devils do put out adaptations of all 3 of these during their time, and you can still find them in buck bins or things like that. I've come across them from time to time. So if you like that stuff in comic book form, check them out. Dragonlance was awesome. It was really arguably one of the best versions of Dungeons and Dragons out there. J.A.
So I'm going to recommend a Savage Sword of Conan story. This appeared originally in Savage Sword of Conan number 24. It is the classic Robert E. Howard story, The Tower of the Elephant, which was originally published in 1933. The Conan story was published in 1977. Roy Thomas writing, John Buscema and Alfredo Alcala art. And that alone should just tell it. But why I'm recommending this versus any sort of Conan story is this one has a sci-fi element to it. So Conan is in this town and he overhears that there's a tower in the town that's owned by this evil sorcerer named Yara, and there's a giant gem, a fabled gem in the tower. So Conan decides he's going to infiltrate the tower to steal the gem. And while he's in the tower, he runs across this creature which has a man's body and an elephant head. And it's not like an elephant head shrunk down to man size. It's like a huge head on a little skinny man's body. And this turns out to be Yag-Kosha. He's this creature from another planet that came down to Earth and taught the evil sorcerer all the magic that the sorcerer knows, and then the guy turned and imprisoned this creature. And so Conan, he fights off creatures and giant spiders, and he ends up helping this Yag-Kosha alien thing escape. And at the end of the day, the tower collapses, Yag-Kosha gets away, the evil sorcerer is killed, and Conan is left empty-handed with nothing for an entire night of adventuring except his sword and his loincloth.
That is a really, really great story. And if you like that story and want it done maybe even in color and with a different artist, I know I'm a bigger fan of Barry Windsor Smith's version.
Barry Windsor Smith version,
you can check that out in issue 4 of the Conan the Barbarian run of Marvel. So honestly, you taught me something today, J.A., because I didn't know that did a second adaptation in Savage Sword of Conan. It makes sense that they would. They did a lot of those, but I'm more familiar with that original issue, which, by the way, at the time prior to that issue being released, the Conan book was tanking. And then finally, Roy Thomas said, I'm going to do Tower of the Elephant, and put it out in issue 4. And that's when Conan really started to finally take off and find some direction during their Marvel adaptation. Plus, if you're checking out social media right now, somebody did, I think it's either a minute or a minute and a half, awesome animated cartoon version of Tower of the Elephant. They condensed the entire story into like a minute and a half in animated style. It is something to behold. So if you can find it on the socials, check it out, because it's super, super neat with some really, really great art. But yeah, something else that you can check out on the socials and on the webs is our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. It's a terrific place where you can rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes in future. And we are also available on the YouTubes, so make sure you're checking out our awesome comic book flip-throughs every day. Chad is wonderful enough to go deep diving into his massive comic book collection to bring you some awesome runs of certain comics, and that will continue well into the future, as well as shorts of the Last Comic Shop, in case you just have a minute. All of that available out there on our YouTubes with a link at our website.
And you can find us on the socials at Last Comic Shop, on our X's, our Blue Skies, all that other stuff. You can find the Gold Age covers. You can find links to all those other things. And while we appreciate you coming to the shop today, we also want to remind you that we are not a real comic shop. Instead, we'd encourage you to go to one of those where you can find the things we talked about, whether that's ElfQuest, which I don't think I brought up, but I have heard about ElfQuest for years and never read it. It's always been in the periphery. So I was super happy to read it today. And maybe you can have that same experience by picking up a copy at your shop if you're not going to elfquest.com to read those issues. Or you can go and look for Dragonlance, which was a recommendation today. Or Bone by Jeff Smith, which is just wonderful. Or check out the Savage Sword of Conan issue 24, The Tower of the Elephant. Or just regular Conan issue 4, which is The Tower of the Elephant. Or that guy on the internet who did an animated Tower of the Elephant. All I know is there's lots of guys with elephant heads teaching sorcery. And I haven't read any of them or seen any of them, so I got to go check out some elephant head dudes. But yeah, all that and more waits for you at your local comic shop, so make sure you check them out. And then you can always double back to our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where they can find what, J.A.?
Well, we've got a link to our merch store, so you can get Last Comic Shop podcast related t-shirts, coffee mugs, tote bags. This week only sexy ElfQuest style t-shirts, which is essentially you just order 2 sizes down and cut the neck a little bit so you show some cleavage.
There you go. You got to give yourself a name, like Cutter or Skydance or Pick Nose.
Chad's nickname is Longbox. I feel that's appropriate for how many comic books he has in his collection. I should be Dad Joke. Maybe that would be my nickname. Which one would be Jay?
He's Random Mail. Or things just show up at Andy's house.
That's it. I love it. Thank you. That will be
Oh, Lordy. All right. Well, hey, until next week, we hope that you join us with whatever names we're using at that time. I'm the host of the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith. And we hope that you stay safe. Stay questing. That's right. Go out there. Find something. Get some friends together and go, we're going to go quest to Target. Find some body wash. The only body wash of the oldest spices or sexy elves.
Too sexy. Too sexy for your sex.
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.